What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mad Blood. My name is Matt, and today I want to talk about 5 very underrated slasher movies that you need to watch. As we kind of go through this list, let me know down in the comments down below which of these movies make your list as well. But let's just jump right into it. So the first movie I want to talk about is House on Sorority Row from 1983. So this movie is essentially about a group of sorority sisters who do a prank on their house mother that they pretty much hate. And the prank, first of all, is a terrible idea. And second of all, goes very south very, very quickly. And there's repercussions that kind of come from this prank and an underlying twist in the movie as well. So this movie, in a lot of ways, punches so far above its weight class. This is a low-budget slasher movie in a lot of ways, but also has so many things in it that don't feel low-budget. I feel like the cast is great in this one. Kate McNeil as Catherine, as kind of our final girl in this movie, is very, very good. I mean, she's gone on to do a lot of other things, not just in horror, but just in acting in general, and has had a long career, but is really good, and you can see why she has. You've also got Vicky in this movie, who, I'm not going to lie, is probably one of the hotter girls in an early 80s slasher movie for sure, but this movie also has some Rosemary's Baby vibes to it in some ways. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's definitely got a little bit of that Rosemary Baby's vibes in it. If you've seen the movie, you kind of know what I'm talking about, but it's got some fun twists and turns in this movie. The music is great, surprisingly, really, really solid throughout the movie. It's timed well. It kind of helps to build the tension well. This movie, as far as the kills go, definitely is not one of those movies you look at as having the greatest effects or anything like that. But overall, they're not terrible. You've got some fun kills here where they put in some effort into the practical effects. Yeah, there's a kill or two that aren't that great. I mean, the hand kill, if you know, well, it's not really a kill, I guess, with that one. It's, a hand, gore effect. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. That one fits maybe into the category of not so good, clearly. But really, this movie, to me, the characters are what make this movie. I think this group of sorority sisters have these different personalities. They play off of each other very well. Obviously, like I mentioned, we've got Catherine as a great kind of final girl who just, plays that role well and helps to kind of bind together the group. And the killer's main weapon in this movie is fun and kind of unique in a lot of ways. And it's just a fun slasher movie. One of the best early 80s slasher movies for sure. So yeah, House on Sorority Row from 1983. The first movie that I want to mention as a slasher, you definitely need to watch for sure. The second movie I want to mention is going to be one that some of you are very familiar with, and definitely a movie that belongs on this list, which is The Prowler from 1981. So The Prowler essentially is about a killer who goes around in World War II army fatigues and stalks this small California coastal town, basically reliving a couple murders that had happened 35 years ago in this town at kind of the annual graduation dance that they have. So one of the first things that I think of when I think of this movie, and I'm sure a lot of you do too, is just Tom Savini. So this is one of the early works that Tom Savini did, practical effects wise, on the horror scene. He'd done some stuff before this, but still, Tom Savini makes this movie in a lot of ways. There's some other great aspects in this movie as well, too, for sure. But Tom's practical effects clearly were a huge focal point in this movie. I mean, there were even some days on set while filming this movie that they were focusing the entire day on one kill because the effects were just such a big focus in this movie and are really damn good. I mean, the effects are the best on this entire list that I'm going to mention today are in this movie. That's a big reason why The Prowler is such a cult classic and is loved all these years later, and is just such a great slasher movie that you really have to watch. If you're a slasher fan and you have not seen The Prowler, you've got to see it. But some of the kills in this movie, to talk a little bit more about that, they linger surprisingly long in this movie. They make you kind of squeamish at times. There's one kill in particular that I'm thinking about in the shower that just lingers, and you're like, damn, that is not only pulled off really well and realistically, but damn, that's brutal. There's, we get the fun kind of flashback in this movie, similar to flashbacks and flash forwards we had seen, we see in like the original Friday the 13th, but in this movie, you flash back to the 40s, we're in Avalon Bay here, and you see everything kind of go down, and then you flash forward to 1980. So that's kind of fun too in the movie. You don't see too many horror movies that flash back to the 40s in a lot of ways, which is fun for me. I enjoy that. I'm also like a big history guy, so I enjoy the World War II small aspect of it. You've also got, in the beginning of the movie, the people kind of like returning from the war. That's a part of the story in the beginning a little bit too, which is fun. This movie also, what's unique about this, so sure a lot of you watching this, a lot of you who are just horror fans are a big fan of Friday the 13th, the final chapter. One of the fan favorites for sure in the Friday franchise. That's a lot of Fs. But so Joseph Zito, who directed the final chapter, also directed this movie. This movie came out before the final chapter, and this movie is essentially the movie that got Joseph Zito the job on Friday 4. The producers and, everybody involved with Friday saw this movie and they're like, this guy is probably going to be able to pull off our direction that we want to go for the final chapter, killing off Jason once and for all. Right. But this movie's, the Prowler is a whodunit, like a lot of movies on this list, or maybe every movie on this list. Great look for the killer in this movie with the army fatigues. I enjoy that. It's unique to me. It's just cool. I like that personally. The main characters in this movie are likable. They're fun. I like following Pam and the cop guy around. Pam's a solid final girl. Just overall, somebody I think is likable. I would have enjoyed seeing in like a sequel or something. But good twists in this movie too. There's a final reveal that has a good twist to it. And just the end of the movie, the finale of the movie is, in my opinion, definitely tense and a bloody ass finale for sure. So the Prowler from 1981, one of the best cult classic slashers, in my opinion, ever made. If you haven't seen it, definitely go and check it out. So, all right, the next movie on the list is going to be Prom Night from 1980. So in a lot of ways, Prom Night's kind of a unique one in the slasher genre, at least for early 80s slashers, because, of course, the original Halloween, not the goriest movie in the world, intentionally focused on some other aspects of the horror with the original Halloween. And similar to, in that regard, this movie, they purposely didn't want to have a ton of gore in Prom Night. But the plot is, we'll get into that a little bit more. The plot essentially of Prom Night is, it's senior prom, right? And there's a masked killer now stalking, in particular, 4 teenagers who were essentially responsible for the, I guess you could say, accidental death, right, of a classmate of theirs, friend of theirs, 6 years earlier. So throughout, when you're watching this movie, you're like, it's a whodunit. So you're wondering, okay, who's behind this? They kind of hint who might have been behind it in the beginning of the movie, but you don't know who the person is. The police are also going after different people, so you're also wondering, okay, who's going to be revealed? Are they going after the right person? Are they not? You can kind of piece it together, which is fun on your own, which is always a good time. But so Prom Night's also a Canadian horror film. It was filmed in Ontario. And a little fun fact about Prom Night, too, is that Halloween producer Irwin Yablans actually was kind of the final person to convince the director of this movie, Paul Lynch, to kind of center this movie around a holiday. Obviously, they had a lot of success doing that with Halloween, but he had some other ideas, but eventually settled on this. Okay, it would be cool to see a slasher movie that revolves around, prom in America. It's a pretty big deal for a lot of people in America. I personally could have given 2 shits about it when it was my prom time, but for a lot of people, it's a big deal. And I enjoy seeing movies based around prom. Even the Texas Chainsaw movie that shows prom, that's still a good time in some ways. But so in this movie, of course, we've also got Jamie Lee Curtis. So that's a big aspect to this movie. So she was fresh off of filming not only Halloween, of course, but also The Fog. And with this movie, they originally were having some issues securing financing for this movie, but when Jamie Lee Curtis signed on, that wasn't a problem any longer because she was kind of establishing herself as, a huge force in the horror community at that time, obviously early on in her career. She's great in this movie. I mean, clearly very talented, comes from a lineage of actors in her family, is just great in essentially everything she's been in. She's an icon. She's a legend, obviously a scream queen in so many different ways, but she kills it in this movie. This is not one of those movies you're going to look back and be like, oh, damn, that was a bad performance from Jamie Lee. She did not bring it in Prom Night 1980. No, she does a great job in this movie and is definitely captivating on screen, in my opinion. You also got another face you'll recognize in this movie is Leslie Nielsen from Naked Gun, Airplane, Creep Show. So right away, when I watched this movie for the first time, I was like, oh, okay, I recognize that guy. But yeah, it's one of those fun coming-of-age 80s movies. You see high schoolers going through high school life in the 80s, smoking on campus, pranking each other, doing pranks that would probably get you expelled nowadays, which is always funny. But a lot of the movie, though, doesn't really feel like a slasher. You get some moments early on that are a little bit, gruesome and hard to watch. But even though there's not like kills throughout the movie, like maybe a movie like The Prowler, you still, in my opinion, find yourself engaged in the movie because the characters are good and you're also interested in what's going to happen here. What's the reveal going to be? Clearly somebody wants to get revenge on what happened 6 years earlier, but what's going to happen? How's it all going to unfold? So that's interesting to me. You've also got a love triangle in this movie. Also, this movie's got some disco music, and I must say, the disco music is pretty on point in this movie for me. I enjoy it. It's a good time, One complaint I do have with this movie is, yeah, some of the scenes probably do linger on a little bit too long. There's a scene where there's a big chase scene in the high school, which is good. It's fun. It's, capped off fairly well at the end of it. But it does linger on a little bit long. There's also another scene involving a van. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. That whole van scene probably lingers on a little bit too long as well. They probably should have came up with some other ideas to kind of mix in there. But still, regardless of that, there's still fun scenes, but just kind of overstay their welcome, probably just a little bit. But yeah, it's just, obviously at the end of the movie, it's prom. It's called Prom Night. We're building towards this big finale at prom. And I do think there is a good payoff in this movie towards the end. At the end of the movie, there's a couple pretty big holy shit moments. There's a kill towards the end where you're just like, damn, okay. And they actually really focused on that kill. They put a lot of time and effort into pulling that off in like as realistic of a way as possible. I don't want to get into too many like spoilers, but if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. You can clearly see what they did. And it's effective. I think they did a good job with it. And I also think the reveal isn't too bad either. Is it the greatest reveal ever? No, but I have a good time with it, and I think it's effective and solid overall. So yeah, Prom Night 1980, another underrated slasher you definitely need to watch. All right, up next is going to be Edge of the Axe from 1988. A movie, I must say, has a pretty damn cool poster. It's definitely one of those movies you're like, oh, that kind of catches my eye a little bit. But this movie centers around an axe murderer who's essentially terrorizing the small Northern California mountain town while two of these like young, you could say they're like obsessed with computers in a way, just really interested in technology and how computers work in a way, are trying to track down who's doing this and just piece together the clues of the whole thing using their computer in a way. So you kind of get a slasher with like a early computer technology edge to it, which is a kind of unique aspect of Edge of the Axe as well. This is definitely a movie I don't hear talked about all that much, and I get why, but we'll get into that a little bit more on my thoughts. But I grew up in Northern California. This was filmed in Big Bear. I didn't grow up near Big Bear. I grew up more in like the, near Tahoe and stuff, but still, that's kind of a bonus point for me, showing something that portrays a similar area to kind of where I grew up, which is fun for me personally. This is the cheesiest movie on this list for sure. So it's going to be a flavor for certain folks. You kind of have to be in a certain mood for this movie, but you can have a good time with it, definitely. I think this movie would be more well known, in my opinion, if it came out several years earlier. This is kind of later, obviously, 1988 in the 80s. Later in the 80s, later, in the whole slasher craze kind of a thing, straight to VHS movie. But, it's one of those movies, I kind of talked about this a second ago, that where it's almost so bad that it's fun. So like I said, you need to be in a mood for this. It's definitely underrated, especially when you're in the mood for kind of a movie like this. I know you guys out there watching, some of you out there love movies like this, that 80s cheese, low budget, straight to VHS slasher like a lot of us do. So an underrated movie, in my opinion. You don't watch this movie, though, just a heads up, for the plot. You definitely don't watch it for the acting chops. And to be honest, you don't even really watch this movie for the kills. There are some kills, there's some gore, there's some gruesomeness to it. But, it's a fun little twist in the movie. There's some interesting aspects of it. It's a fun setting. It's corny, it's cheesy. All the interactions with the cops who are kind of crooked, but not really at the same time, sort of. It's a good time. I think Edge of the Axe is an underrated slasher. I have a good time with it. Decent twist. Ambiguous kind of ending. Yeah, there you go. Edge of the Axe from 1988. Another underrated slasher I think you should watch. So next slasher on the list, and the last one we're going to talk about in this video, is going to be Slumber Party Massacre from 1982. This is a movie I have a good time with. The first time I watched this, I clearly was like, okay, they want to make this movie and they are not going to apologize about it. And what kind of movie am I talking about? Well, a lot of times when you think about early 80s slashers, what do you think about, right? You think about a few things. You think about, boobs, horny teens, and a lot of gore. And this movie has all three of those. It checks those boxes for sure. A lot of nudity, a lot of gore, and a lot of horny teens, definitely. So the Slumber Party Massacre, so it essentially follows these girls who are having a slumber party, obviously. But the twist is there's a newly escaped psychotic killer that uses a drill for his main weapon on the loose. And he finds himself in their neighborhood while they're having a slumber party. Unfortunate for them. So, but this movie is, originally it was written to be a slasher parody, just a full-on funny parody. But then they kind of tweaked it a bit, for sure, and wanted to make it a little bit more serious. But there's definitely a lot of things in this movie still in it from the parody phase. So there's a lot of there's a lot of intentional humor, but also unintentional humor in this movie. Definitely one of the funnier movies on this list today that I'm talking about, for sure. But I think this is a great background slasher movie to put on with the right crowd who's into this kind of thing. Just a casual slasher movie you can laugh at, you can look over, have some good times with, if you're having some drinks or whatever. I think it's one of those good background slasher movies, definitely. And, to me, of course, this movie's not on that level, but it does have some Halloween vibes to it, Halloween 78 vibes to it. There's some creepiness, there's some eeriness to it. I think the main killer in this movie is solid. His name is Russ Thorne. I call him the denim driller killer, essentially. His weapon, I think, is cool. Something that's pretty unique in the genre. I like it when the main killer in a slasher uses something that they impulsively just grab out of a shed or somebody's house or something because they're just like, I got to get this shit done. It's like The Burning, the garden shears. Love that. It's just like, man, I didn't really think about this because I'm a crazy person. I just grabbed something that was sharp and just started going ham. And in this movie, you've got this drill thing, like I said. So, and Russ Thorne's just a creepy killer. A little bit motiveless in a way because he's just psychotic. This movie is just going to slap you across the face with 80s vibes and nostalgia if you're from that era. The soundtrack kind of sounds like something straight out of a Zelda video game. You're spending some time at the high school. Even me, I was very young in the 80s, but when you grow up in the 90s, there's still a lot of high schools and schools that clearly haven't been renovated. So you're essentially just in a 1980s school. So I get some nostalgia from the school and stuff and other things, which is fun. Just a ton of nostalgia in this movie. And to me, Slumber Party Massacre, the finale, the final scene, I think it's actually pretty intense. I enjoy it. It's got a good kill. Probably my favorite kill in the movie towards the end, which is a good time. But yeah, that is the 5th and final movie that I want to mention for the 5 very underrated slasher movies that you need to watch right there. Let me know down in the comments down below which movies I should talk about on my next list. Which of these movies make your list? But thanks so much for watching, everybody. Really appreciate it. If you enjoy horror content like this, make sure you subscribe. But I will talk to you all on the next one.